I never imagined I'd find myself here, frantically typing out my darkest, most shameful secret to strangers I'll never meet. But here I am. The clock reads 3 in the morning, and the cold glow of my laptop screen is the only light in a room that feels too heavy for sleep. My heart pounds with a weight so crushing I can barely breathe. A mix of guilt, confusion, and fear knotting every inch of my insides. I don't know what I want from this outlet. Advice, understanding, condemnation, or maybe just a place to unload what I've kept buried for far too long. I'm 25 years old, and for almost a decade, my best friend Anna has been the center of my world. When I say best friend, I mean the kind of bond where people joke we're basically married. We share everything. The kind of intimacy born from years of scraped knees, whispered secrets, and silent support when the world felt impossibly cruel. Anna isn't just someone I call when I need to talk. She's my family by choice. The sister I never had but always needed. Our story began in high school, which for many is a confusing, lonely mess of identity, but for me, it was darker than most. I'd just transferred to a new school, a place where I was invisible, awkward, and painfully shy. Lunchtimes were the worst. The halls filled up as students poured out of classrooms, but I always found myself retreating to the library, choosing to sit alone by the window rather than face a sea of disinterested or judgmental eyes. One afternoon, that routine shattered when Anna slid into the chair opposite me without a word and grinned that goofy, disarming smile that would become so familiar. "You look lonely," she said, simple and sincere. "Want to sit with me instead?" That moment marked the beginning of everything. It was such a small act, yet it felt monumental to someone like me whose loneliest days had been silent and gray. I nodded, and just like that, I had a companion in a sea of strangers. From that day forward, Anna became my lifeline. She pulled me into her world, her group of friends that were loud and messy but welcoming, her noisy family that treated me like one of their own, and her vibrant outlook on life that challenged my timid ways. Together, we navigated the chaos of adolescence, sharing late-night movie marathons in her bedroom bathed in fairy lights, sneaking out to 24-hour diners, and scribbling reckless lists of faraway places we pledged to visit someday. By the time prom came around, we were inseparable. We dressed in mismatched gowns and corsages gone slightly askew, laughing through the awkward dances and endless selfies. It was imperfect and beautiful, a snapshot of young friendship fueled by dreams and endless hope. College was a continuation of our story, this time as roommates crammed into a tiny dorm room that barely fit the mismatched bed sheets and stacks of textbooks we surrounded ourselves with. We lived off instant noodles and caffeine, supporting each other through every heartbreak, failed exam, and family drama. When I was rear-ended in my first car accident, she was the one who sat with me in the hospital waiting room, squeezing my hand until the pain faded. When my grandmother passed away, Anna stayed up with me all night, comforting me with stories and tears. Our bond wasn't just friendship, it was sisterhood. Then, about a year and a half ago, Anna met Mark. At first, I barely thought about it. Anna had a history of dating men who didn't deserve her, and most of their relationships fizzled fast. But Mark was different. He had this quiet confidence that wasn't showy or aggressive. The first time I saw him at one of Anna's gatherings, he was telling a story about a disastrous road trip with his co-workers, and everyone was hanging on every word. His laughter was genuine, contagious, and his warmth filled the room in a way I hadn't expected. When his eyes met mine for a flash, I felt something unfamiliar. A sudden jolt in my chest, a surge of electricity that made my palms clammy and my breath catch. I told myself it was just nerves, a trick of my imagination fueled by years of loneliness and insecurity. After all, Mark was Anna's boyfriend, and the last thing I wanted was to be the one who complicated that. For months, everything seemed fine. Anna was happier than I'd ever seen her, texting me endless paragraphs about how Mark listened to her, made her feel special, and gave her hope for a future. I was genuinely happy for her. But then the cracks began. Not between Anna and Mark, but within me. It started with small things. When Anna left the table to get a drink, Mark would turn to me and ask questions. Not casual small talk, but thoughtful ones that lingered. He remembered details about my work, my anxieties, even the things I'd casually mentioned weeks before. Sometimes he'd mutter a sarcastic comment under his breath, shared only with me, and I'd laugh quietly while Anna chatted elsewhere. I told myself it was harmless. Just friendly, nothing more. But the truth was darker. I found myself craving those moments, wanting his attention more than I should. I hated myself for it. I believed I was loyal, that I would never, could never, betray Anna. Yet every time Mark looked at me with those eyes, my resolve weakened. I started living a double life. Loyal best friend in public, burning with secret desire in private. And then came the night that changed everything. It was 6 months ago, at a party Anna's coworker hosted. The room buzzed with easy chatter and music, people scattered in small groups. Anna, radiant and carefree as ever, drank too much and collapsed onto a couch, giggling and nearly asleep. Mark stayed by her side a while, gently stroking her hair, before she finally drifted off completely. One by one, people left. I could have left. I should have left. But I didn't. Instead, the night dissolved into something I wasn't prepared for. Mark and me in the kitchen, alone. The fridge hummed, the dim light casting shadows, and the silence between us felt thick with unsaid things. We started talking about work, favorite movies, silly stories, but then the conversation shifted. He asked me questions I'd never been asked before, about my dreams, my fears, the parts of me I hid even from Anna. His gaze held me, unflinching, and my defenses began to crumble. And then his hand found mine. It was just a brush of fingers, a fleeting touch, but it felt like a spark igniting a wildfire inside me. His voice softened. Don't talk about yourself like that. You're better than you realize. My heart thumped so loudly I thought it might betray me. I pulled my hand away, flustered and terrified. But inside, I knew the damage was done. A line had been crossed, one I couldn't ignore. From that moment on, nothing was the same. Not to Anna, not to Mark, but most of all, not to me. That night in the kitchen marked the beginning of a slow unraveling inside me. A fracture deep enough to shake the very foundation of everything I understood about loyalty, love, and myself. Mark's touch, fleeting and almost accidental, etched a secret imprint on my skin and soul. A silent spark lighting a fire I wasn't ready to confront. The guilt was immediate and suffocating, but it was tangled with a strange, intoxicating warmth I hadn't expected to feel. For days after, I replayed every moment of that evening in my mind, dissecting the tone of his voice, the way his fingers lingered for one split second more than necessary. I told myself it meant nothing. I was the loyal best friend. That was my identity. The one thing I could be sure of. I could never betray Anna. Yet somewhere beneath the surface, a dangerous craving took root. I started noticing Mark differently. The way his eyes caught the light in certain rooms, his quiet, confident laugh, and the way he seemed to understand things about me that even Anna hadn't fully grasped. When Anna glowed about her relationship, I wanted to feel happy with her. I truly did. But envy crept alongside the happiness like a shadow. It wasn't just admiration or longing. It was far more complicated, messy, and painful. Subtle interactions between Mark and me grew more frequent, more charged. It began with prolonged eye contact, accidental touches during group conversations, and those quiet jokes only we shared. Sometimes, when Anna wasn't looking, Mark's glances would catch me across the room, full of meanings I wasn't sure I could, or should, decipher. I told myself these feelings were temporary, a fleeting crush that would pass. I buried the gnawing sensation deep inside, forcing smiles when Anna leaned into Mark's shoulder, ignoring the bitter ache that surged with every affectionate glance they exchanged. I told myself it was nothing, that this was just an innocent, broken fantasy born of too many lonely nights. But the line between fantasy and reality began to blur. One particular weekend, Anna was away visiting her family, and Mark invited me over, insisting he needed help with a work project. I was hesitant but didn't want to disappoint or raise suspicions. That night was quiet at first, just two people working late, sipping wine and sharing stories. But the words became deeper, more personal. Mark's questions probed places in my heart I'd never dared to explore. "Do you feel fulfilled?" he asked softly. "Are you chasing the right dreams?" I couldn't look away from him. His gaze was magnetic, intense, yet kind. I laughed nervously when he made a joke, but the underlying tension was palpable. There was a moment when his hand brushed against mine again. This time, I didn't pull away. Silence stretched between us. The hum of the city outside seemed distant, irrelevant. I wanted to reach out further but was paralyzed by fear. Fear of betrayal, of losing the person I'd trusted most, of watching everything I'd built come crashing down. In that quiet, charged space, I realized I was standing at a precipice. One step forward could ruin everything. My friendship with Anna, my self-respect, my sense of who I thought I was. I left that night without resolving the tension, but inside, something had shifted irreparably. The secret desire blossomed alongside a growing war between my heart and conscience. Days turned into weeks, and the weight became unbearable. I found myself living two lives, a devoted, protective best friend to Anna, and a woman caught in a web of reckless longing with Mark. I lied to myself, to Anna, to anyone who asked how I was doing. It was exhausting. I stopped sharing the little things with Anna. I avoided prolonged eye contact, dodged invitations, and buried myself in work and pretend calm. Each time I looked at Mark, I felt sick with guilt, but also a strange thrill that was impossible to ignore. Writing became my only refuge. At night, when the world was asleep, I poured my thoughts into digital pages no one would ever read. I confessed my fears, my longing, my self-loathing. Yet even these private admissions weren't enough to ease the storm inside. The inevitable began to unfold when Anna mentioned Mark's increasing talks about me. Over lunch one afternoon, she smiled bright, but with a trace of uncertainty in her eyes. "He talks about you a lot," she said, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "Says he loves your conversations. I'm glad you're part of our lives." My chest tightened. My secret was no longer mine alone. It hung between us, invisible but suffocating. One evening, after Mark had left, Anna and I sat in her living room, surrounded by the glow of fairy lights she'd always adored. The silence between us was heavy. The memories of years, of laughter, tears, and shared dreams, felt sacred and fragile all at once. I wanted to confess, to spill everything and beg her forgiveness. But the thought of shattering her heart stopped me cold. So I stayed silent. But silence is violence. The distance between us grew. Anna noticed the forced smiles, the hesitation in my words, the withdrawal in my eyes. One night, she confronted me softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is something wrong?" she asked, searching my face for a truth I wasn't ready to give. I broke down then, the dam I'd held intact for so long finally giving way. I cried like I hadn't in years, raw, desperate, full of regret and fear. My confession tumbled out, faltering but honest, spilling my guilt, desires, and fear of losing her. The words shattered the room, the fragile trust between us. For days afterward, we stumbled through heartbreak. Conversations filled with tears and anger, apologies mixed with confusion. Mark's betrayal wasn't just his, it was ours, a fracture born in silence and secrecy. Anna needed space. So did I. We drifted, suspended between broken trust and the hope for healing. Even in despair, forgiveness flickered, a fragile promise that wounds can mend, though scars remain. Rebuilding isn't easy. It's messy, painstaking work that tests the limits of love, trust, and time. We're not the same people we were, but we're still here, still trying. In the quiet moments, away from the noise of the world, we reminded each other of the bond that had once felt unbreakable. The memories of shared dreams and whispered secrets became the foundation for repair. I no longer pretended to be perfect. I owned my mistakes openly and without defensiveness. Anna, too, allowed herself to be vulnerable in ways she hadn't before. Our friendship shifted shape. It was no longer the uncomplicated joy of youth, but a testament to resilience and forgiveness. Yet even with hope, I carry the scars of what I've done. There are times I wonder who I am now. The woman capable of betraying a soulmate, of succumbing to temptation despite knowing the consequences. Is that the real me? Or just a moment of weakness? Learning to live with the answers isn't easy, but it is necessary. In those reflections, I see growth. I've learned empathy, humility, and the fierce power of accountability. I've come to understand that love, whether friendship or something more, is flawed, imperfect, and requires constant care. Our story is far from over. Anna and I are navigating new waters, still learning to trust the tides. The future is uncertain, but the foundation is stronger because it has been tested and tempered by fire. I don't know where this path will ultimately lead us. Maybe we will rebuild what was lost, or maybe we will forge a new kind of relationship. Different, but meaningful in its own right. What I do know is that honesty is the first step forward, and forgiveness is the road we must walk together, one courageous day at a time. In the months that followed, I found myself constantly reflecting on identity. Who I was before Mark, and these feelings came crashing into my life, and who I was becoming. My relationship with Anna had been a constant pillar, a source of comfort and security in a world that often felt unpredictable and uncaring. But now, that certainty felt like a distant memory, a fragile thread I was desperately trying to hold on to while navigating the chaos I helped create. One of the hardest truths I had to face was that despite my love for Anna, I was deeply flawed. I was human, capable of desire, confusion, and mistakes that no amount of guilt could undo. Coming to terms with my imperfections was the first step in owning my actions, rather than hiding behind shame or excuses. Our therapy sessions became a lifeline. The process of unraveling years of intertwined lives, habits, and expectations was daunting. We dug into the history of our friendship, the pains and joys, the patterns we never saw coming. Anna was brave. In her vulnerability, sharing her feelings of betrayal and heartbreak, while I tried to balance my remorse with hope for repair. During one particularly raw session, I remember Anna saying, "I don't know if I can ever fully trust you again, but I want to try, because you're my sister. You're the one who's been there through everything." Her words struck me with both pain and gratitude. The road to forgiveness would be long and winding, riddled with hurdles, but the willingness to try, that fragile thread, was enough to keep me moving forward. Outside therapy, life demanded we function like everyone else. Work, family, and social expectations didn't pause for our conflicts. I found myself submerged in tasks and routines, often using busyness as a shield against painful thoughts. Yet beneath the surface, the emotional turmoil lurked, reminding me of the fragile balance I was trying to maintain. Mark, too, became a closed chapter. I cut off communication abruptly, unable to face the risk of falling back into temptation or dishonesty. It was one of the few decisions I had clarity about. He represented a danger not just to my friendship with Anna, but to my own sense of self. Still, I didn't escape the ghost of what might have been, the tantalizing thought of a life where I answered to my desires rather than my morals. But that was a dangerous fantasy, and I was not that person anymore. I reconnected with parts of myself I had neglected for years. Hobbies abandoned, friendships put on hold, dreams sacrificed for comfort and fear. It was painful but necessary to rebuild my identity beyond the roles of best friend or conflicted lover. One evening, while walking through a quiet park near my apartment, I realized how much I'd changed. The girl I was, the shy, awkward new kid in high school, would never have dreamed of this level of introspection, vulnerability, or strength. I had grown, even if the road was littered with painful lessons. Anna and I rebuilt our friendship slowly, learning new ways to connect with honesty as the cornerstone. We shared books, coffee dates, and late-night talks that weren't just surface level but deeply real. The silences between us became spaces of comfort rather than suspicion. It wasn't perfect. There were setbacks, days when panic or resentment flared, moments when past wounds reopened unexpectedly. But those were outweighed by progress, by the mutual commitment to repair what was fractured. Mark became less central in our conversations, a wound slowly closing though never fully forgotten. We agreed to keep boundaries firm, prioritizing our friendship above all. Outside this circle, life moved forward. I leaned on old friends, rekindled hobbies, and took small steps toward new dreams. Each act of self-care was a quiet rebellion against the guilt that threatened to consume me. In moments of solitude, I wrote letters I never sent, to Mark, to Anna, to myself, expressing thoughts too painful to say aloud. Those letters became a form of catharsis, untangling emotions one word at a time. Slowly, I learned to embrace vulnerability, not as weakness, but as strength. It was terrifying to expose my flawed self to the world, but it was the only path toward genuine connection and healing. Anna and I still have a long way to go. Some days, the old wounds throb, and past mistakes feel like shadows threatening to swallow us whole. But we face those days together, leaning into the history that binds us and the hope that sustains us. Our story is a testament to the complexity of human relationships, of love, betrayal, forgiveness, and resilience. It is a reminder that even the deepest cracks can hold beauty when approached with honesty and courage. I don't have all the answers, and I don't expect a fairy tale resolution. What I do know is that true friendship requires constant work, empathy, and the willingness to face uncomfortable truths. Even as we began to rebuild, the aftermath of what happened lingered like a low hum beneath the surface of our lives. Moments of fragility slipped into everyday conversations and gestures, reminding both Anna and me that some wounds heal slowly, if at all. Every shared laugh carried the weight of unsaid apologies, every touch a tentative step towards trust. The hardest moments often came when I least expected them. One afternoon, Anna invited me to her family's annual reunion. I hesitated, unsure if I was ready to face the people who had long embraced me as part of their world. But I agreed, wanting to show her, and myself, that I was committed to moving forward. That weekend was a mix of warmth and awkwardness. Her family surrounded us with love, but I could sense their questions beneath polite smiles. They knew of the tension, the silence, the unspoken pain between Anna and me. Still, they welcomed me as I was, a flawed, remorseful woman trying to make amends. Anna's parents were especially kind that weekend, their eyes holding a mixture of sympathy and hope. Her mother pulled me aside and whispered, "What matters is that you're both trying. That's what family does." Those words struck a chord deep within me. Family wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up, falling, and rising together. Back home, the quiet nights were often the hardest. Alone, I wrestled with memories and questions with no clear answers. Would Anna ever fully forgive me? Could the friendship we once shared ever be the same? And most painfully, could I forgive myself? The process of healing requires patience, something I didn't always have. I cycled through emotions, anger, despair, hope, all riding waves too powerful to control. Writing remained my refuge, each word a step toward clarity. In an unexpected moment of clarity, I realized that the desire I'd felt for Mark was never truly about him. It was about wanting to be seen, truly seen, by someone other than Anna. Years of feeling invisible, unheard and unworthy had left. A crack I hadn't known existed until it was filled with dangerous longing. Understanding this shifted my perspective. It wasn't Mark who was the problem. It was my own unmet needs, my own fears and insecurities that led me down this path. Armed with this knowledge, I began working harder on self-love, learning to recognize my worth outside of any relationship. It wasn't an overnight change. It was a deep, ongoing journey. Anna and I continued therapy, building a delicate bridge of communication and understanding. We didn't shy away from the hard topics. Instead, we faced them head-on, acknowledging the pain and committing to honesty. One of the most profound lessons was learning to accept the imperfection in ourselves and each other. Forgiveness doesn't erase mistakes. It allows space for growth despite them. Gradually, our friendship evolved into something new, still rooted in years of history, but marked by greater depth and maturity. We celebrated small victories, a day without tension, a night of genuine laughter, a shared secret once again. The road was far from smooth. Setbacks came unexpectedly, a forgotten anniversary, a misunderstood comment, but each was an opportunity to reaffirm commitment. Mark became less central in our conversations, a wound slowly closing, though never fully forgotten. We agreed to keep boundaries firm, prioritizing our friendship above all. Outside this circle, life moved forward. I leaned on old friends, rekindled hobbies, and took small steps toward new dreams. Each act of self-care was a quiet rebellion against the guilt that threatened to consume me. In moments of solitude, I wrote letters I never sent, to Mark, to Anna, to myself, expressing thoughts too painful to say aloud. Those letters became a form of catharsis, untangling emotions one word at a time. Slowly, I learned to embrace vulnerability, not as weakness, but as strength. It was terrifying to expose my flawed self to the world, but it was the only path toward genuine connection and healing. Anna and I still have a long way to go. Some days, the old wounds throb, and past mistakes feel like shadows threatening to swallow us whole. But we face those days together, leaning into the history that binds us and the hope that sustains us. Our story is a testament to the complexity of human relationships, of love, betrayal, forgiveness, and resilience. It is a reminder that even the deepest cracks can hold beauty when approached with honesty and courage. I don't have all the answers, and I don't expect a fairy tale resolution. What I do know is that true friendship requires constant work, empathy, and the willingness to face uncomfortable truths. For now, that is where I stand, hopeful, wounded, and trying.